Welcome, I'm Di Smith. I'm the author of the book you see on screen. In this video, I'm looking at the health aspects contributed to a country. A person is only going to be affected by them if their own planets are in the same orb where they are opposing, squaring, or making a 150-degree angle. So it's nothing to panic about. In previous videos, I've worked on Australia and cancer being the third leading cause of death recorded by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. But when all the different types of cancer were combined, it became the second highest cause of death. In my book on screen, I looked into Australia and the United States of America and their health aspects. It was to give an alternative way of looking at astrology and defocalizing it so it's not made personal. In doing the videos after the book, I've gone into more detail of individual areas, and to be honest, it has helped me to go further into looking at cures using astrology. In saying that, it's the constellations, planets and houses that have led me to parts of the body. Each planet, constellation and house has a cell salt, otherwise known as a tissue salt. These are put out by Dr. Stressler, and these can lead us to cures. What I've done is broken down those into chemicals and looked into foods that have high amounts of those same chemicals. But also there are foods, and there are 10 pages of foods in the above book where there is a high cell salt as stating relating to the planet's constellation and house. Each of them are required in a formula. Not that I've made formulas for many years, but if a scientist is looking for a cure, I recommend that they look into all the aspects, all the 3 aspects I've mentioned. Scientists have recorded with heart failure there is often, but not always, an elevated liver enzyme or a damaged liver. And this is the illness I'm looking at in this video. There were 611,500 people died in 2016 in America by cardiovascular disease. The wheel on the screen is that of the United States, taken from the time of the Declaration of Independence. The first circle shows the house position from 1 to 12. This is calculated on the time of birth, and it shows an area something will take place. The second wheel has a symbol of planets in, and it is the natal chart, the time of birth, the date of birth, sorry. The time, date and birth, where, as I said, you get the house from the time of birth. Now, that shows the positions of the planets for the natal chart. The next is the progressions showing how a country has learnt, and the outer area shows transits, which I've written in normal language, not using symbols. Position of planets is calculated from the time and date of birth of a country. So not only does a person have a natal chart from their time of birth, also a country can have that as well. The yellow areas that have come into this chart now are the heart areas. If there are problems, we expect to see close degrees and squares and oppositions. And this is what you see in the yellow part of these charts which I've outlined. I have mentioned heart and liver's enzymes. I haven't read that liver enzymes affect the heart. As I said, in the earlier one, the heart is damaged after a heart failure or heart attack. So, and previous videos, I've looked into the liver enzyme, which is escalated. The troponin is escalated when there's illness. Now, if you look to the 8th house in yellow at around 2 o'clock on a watch, you'll see there is a natal sun and a natal Jupiter together on the inner wheel. The Sun rules the heart and Jupiter rules the liver. Progress Jupiter on the outer wheel has moved from 5 degrees to 15 degrees, and it's in the sign of Cancer. Now, it has now passed the Sun, the natal Sun. The natal area does not, natal planets and their positions are fixed. But the progressed planets move extremely slowly. It's calculated, I've calculated them on 1 day for 1 year. Now, as I've said, the Sun rules the heart and Jupiter rules the liver. Progress Jupiter on the outer wheel has moved, as I said, 5 to 15 degrees. But if you look to the 10th house in yellow, you will notice that between the Sun and Jupiter at 14 degrees squaring is Saturn. Degrees and minutes are extremely important because this is where illness occurs, when they're in close proximity. But I want to get back to the 8th house. The 8th house is ruled by Scorpio. The part of the anatomy it rules is the groin, and the internal organs are the sex hormones and primarily the female hormones. Hormone therapy is a great part of the American life and are given to women for hormone replacement therapy once they reach menopause, and sometimes earlier to regulate their periods. A time of change and fertility to infertility is when the hormone replacement therapy is given for midlife women, middle-aged women. This is a natural event for women. For men, it isn't as obvious, but they often suffer from lower hormone count, and it is being suggested that now they take hormone replacement. It's also been said that female hormones are good for the American female heart, and they've suggested for women with this disease to take hormone replacement therapies. To me, this is all quite interesting because I've been brought to these areas by looking up the planet and house. And there's a focal point in America to use the areas of Scorpio for hormone replacement, Jupiter showing the increase in troponin in liver problems, and the Sun being a ruler of the heart, all clumped together to make a composite package to cure. But if there hadn't been an illness caused by planetary positions, there wouldn't have had to be a cure. It also, the Sun is also the physical self as opposed to the brain. The 8th house is also the ruler of the sexual hormones, not just the hormones. Taurus in the opposite sign is actually the growth hormones, but these are the sexual hormones. The 8th house, Scorpio and Pluto, are also the ruler of death. But when in a positive position, it's the ruler of resurrection. In a sense, this is already being explained, but why heart disease is the highest cause of death in the USA. But in the chart now on the screen, it shows the areas of Scorpio, Pluto, and the 8th house. But I'd like to stress it is only when the planets are in an ill aspect that death of an organ can occur. Now, I'll go back to the previous screen. You can see, before that, you can see that where Scorpio is, where Pluto is, and where the 8th house is. And you can see primarily that the 8th house is the house where the Sun is in, which rules the heart. So, Now, as I said, I've spoken of the constellation of the Sun and Jupiter are in now, which is in Cancer. But Cancer is a sensitive sign. It rules the family, mothers, babies, and the emotions. It rules home life, especially the 4th house. Because it's emotional, it is also a water sign, and so is the 8th house. In fact, water is very prevalent in their chart when we look at the planets' constellation houses and where they are situated along with their own characteristics. This is another calculation that astrologers can do. The tissue salt for Cancer is calcium fluoride, and for many years fluoride was put into water treatment plants along with other chemicals, so it was also part of the American lifestyle. It's been found by fluoridefree.org.nz, New Zealand, that means that fluoride can lead to increased heart attacks. And you have to remember, you have to calculate that there are 3 planets in the Cancer sign, so it's repeated. That effect is repeated and repeated and repeated. There also has to be another catalyst, an ill aspect that comes from the problem. And if you noticed in the 10th house, Saturn, which is also highlighted in yellow, and I brought to your attention earlier, Saturn's soul salt is calcium phosphate. It's an earth sign, so it could be a mineral as opposed to a calcium you find in crab or exoskeletal fish, where the bone is on the outside. Saturn also rules bones in humans, or a bone in a goat, which is its symbol, and that is giving us a clue, a cure, in fact, if used. It's also a carbohydrate and a building block. It's in the Libra constellation. This brings in sugar. Libra also rules the veins. I believe the blockage from the heart to the bones and veins would be enough to cause a heart attack. When there can't be a natural flow from the heart and the Sun is in a water sign, it has caused congestive heart disease, which is an overflow of fluid leaking from the heart. It also illustrates when a country has to work at partnership on a universal scale and there is a square to the self. So we have an internal analysis, and now I'm going to the external analysis. If things go wrong in partnership, which is seen in Libra, Saturn in Libra, in the 10th house, it then ricochets or rebounds onto Jupiter back in the 8th house. So, as I said, it also illustrates when a country has to work at partnership on a universal scale and there is a square to the self. It finds it hard to promote itself without looking overly compassionate or evil. Now, the 8th house is ruled by Scorpio, remember, so it can give an evil effect as well as a truly compassionate one. And this is the 8th house effect. If things go wrong in partnership, it then ricochets or rebounds onto Jupiter, which rules the hopes, which are deadened by being in the 8th house. This outcome affects the liver, which could explain why the liver is diseased by the enzymes of the heart after a heart attack. Saturn being progressed means for some years it will be near Jupiter, whilst moving away from the natal Sun, the ruler of the heart. Progress Jupiter will also be moving at a slightly faster speed, but I'd need to do more research to go into such detail, and the video is just not long enough. I should mention the wheels I bring on the screen are more concise in detail than the ones I have in the book. And in the book I have worked on a tertiary chart which works on 1 day for a month, so the wheel will be totally different. The next wheel actually shows how unpredictably or how unpredictable behaviour of others have affected the heart by progressed sun, which is illustrated by the president. This is in a more direct manner, as in green on the right, in natal and progressed Uranus, which is square, you can see the progressed Uranus has moved back, not quite a full degree. The progressed Sun on the bottom in the 3rd house at 11 degrees Pisces. It's the same degrees as the natal Sun in the 8th house. Whilst the progressed minutes show 9 degrees, or 9 minutes, and the natal 23 minutes, it's in a favourable position as it's making a 120 degree angle or trine, which is an easy flow. So in this case, the heart enzymes of the natal Sun aren't affecting the heart shown by the progressed unfavourable position of the Sun. But as mentioned on the right, highlighted in green, is progressed and natal Uranus. Uranus would cause unpredictable circulation problems, causing the heart to pump unpredictably. The Sun in the 3rd house would explain the president, who is renowned for his tweeters. The 3rd house is the area of talking. The square causes it to be viewed as a negative by the nicer people of his community. The Sun rules rulers as well. And the 3rd house also rules brothers, sisters, neighbours and regular communities that surround the country, and what the president considers his home and his neighbours. He is often responding to things the news has said that has caused hurt. And so when he was first elected, he had very little good things to say about the universal world. This is indicated by the Uranus, Aquarius and 11th house, where he actually refused many presidential meetings, except for saying how good Putin was the earlier reactions illustrates the square we see with the Sun and natal and Uranus, progress Uranus. Uranus rules circulation and the world, and consequently newspapers, which the president banned interviews with. So it's very precise when you look at a chart and what you can see in that chart when you reflect on what has happened. So it also makes it easier to understand. It appears when he's tweeting that he forgets that the rest of the world is listening. Being in Pisces shows he's often making mistakes and appears confused. He could even be under the influence, as these areas all relate to Pisces. In this slide, I've added Saturn. What we see here is that there is a 210 degree angle being made from the Sun to Saturn, which has meant his comments have affected the country's ability to work effectively, disturbing businesses and trade, as Saturn is squaring Jupiter, which brings in a deadening of hopes and optimism, being in the 8th house ruled by Scorpio. They can then turn aggressive with Jupiter squaring Mars. It's like with the philosophies and hopes all banned, it becomes angry. Just above natal Saturn, Mars is. This causes the countries which are closely related by language and similarities in government, brought about by the same British Empire, to become sympathetic, and with progressed Mercury in Aquarius making a trine to Mars. But this then plays on the ego. Remember that the Sun rules the heart, and whilst illness can be internalised, there is an external influence, and that there is a great deal that can be seen and needs to be understood when interpreting a chart. The Sun is moving away from Uranus but will still be in quite close proximity for a few more years, and unfortunately as it moves away it gets closer to opposing Neptune, causing fear and other illnesses of a country, not a person. If you were affected, say, for loss of memory, a Neptune illness, these problems would show up in your chart if you had a date and place of birth. If you had a time of birth, it would be even better because it would give an astrologer the additional information, and the place already, if you're in a country that you live and were born, you already have the country's part there of the country's influence. It needs to be remembered that I'm using a country's chart to indicate the areas of illness that can be seen, and that there are a relatively small number of people that have suffered from heart disease, that which I've spoken about, compared to a population of approximately 350 million people. Only talking about 600,000. And there are different types of illnesses that would be seen in other countries. I believe India still has typhoid. I'll finish here, and I'd like to thank you for watching, and bye for now.